Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Urban Tree Festival. This session is all about your garden tree. So if you are puzzled by an issue with your tree and you want to meet the authors of this great book, then this is a session for you. But before I start, I'm going to hand over to Greg Packman, who is one of the organisers of the Urban Tree Festival. Greg.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Yeah, big thank you to everyone who's come today. I just wanted to very briefly talk about the Urban Tree Festival itself. So the Tree Festival is a celebration of all things urban trees, their benefits and beauty, their majesty and their magic. The festival seeks to connect tree lovers and tree newcomers alike to their local urban trees, connect people to each other, and to share tree knowledge far and wide. The festival runs until this Sunday, the 23rd. We're now at the halfway point of the festival. And we still have a wide range of fantastic and inspiring events to come. So please check out the website, and I'll post a few links in the chat box as well, where you can find out more. The festival is sort of run and organised by volunteers. We do it all for free. It's very much a passion project, and we're very dependent upon any donations you can afford to give. So anyone who does want to donate, it's always immensely appreciated. And again, it's something that I'll put in the chat box. But I'll pass back to Sharon, who can introduce today's session. So, thank you.
Well, thank you, Greg. So we have Tony Kirkham, MBE, who is from Kew Gardens, and you can watch him on a programme which is on Channel 5 on Thursday at 8 on A Year in Kew. And we have Kenton Rogers, who is a chartered arboriculturalist from Treeconomics, which is a social enterprise which looks at eye-tree in a really fantastic way of assessing large tree populations. They're both the author of this book, but before I start on that, just a little bit of housekeeping. We really want you to get involved. So if you can see the chat function down below, do say hello to everybody, say where you're from, and throughout the events, please ask a question. Now, I'll be monitoring the questions, and if I think, we can ask that one, I will contact you privately on the chat, so you won't suddenly be thrown into you're on camera. And when you ask your question, please say your name and where you're from. If you're happy to, please turn on your camera. That makes it nice and friendly. But if that's not for you, that's absolutely fine, because we are recording. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Tony and Kirkham and just start by asking them, why did you write this book, Tony?
Well, actually, it was an idea from Kenton, who I think Kenton was approached by the Haynes Manual people, who some of us will remember the car manuals that they used to do. And I think we've all used them in our time to tinker away with our first and second cars. Now you can't do that because all the cars are electronic. They all require specialist attention. And I think Haynes are looking at other possibilities of for writing do-it-yourself manuals on, and they approached Kenton to see if he would be interested in writing one on trees, looking after trees in your garden, etc. And then Kenton approached me and asked me if I would be interested in co-writing it with him, and you know, who better to write a book on arboriculture with than Kenton. So I thought it would be a really good idea, and it was a gap in the market, and anything that we can do to promote the health of trees and help people manage trees in the garden from selection right through to to removal would be a good thing. And a book was born, and between us we wrote it, and it was probably one of the easiest books I've written, actually, because we both had our strengths, and we shared that through the book, I think. You know, is that right, Kenton?
Yeah, I'd say that. Yeah, it was myself actually that approached Haynes to write the book, but rather than the other way around. But yeah, I think Tony and I both felt that there were a lot of books written for professionals, but none really written for the homeowner on their trees. There's a lot of gardening books that might include a chapter on trees, and there's a lot of great books. You know, they're more narrative on trees, like the The Secret Life of Trees, Colin Tudge's book, and the more recent one that was talking about the wood wide web, but there wasn't really a practical manual, and that's something we both felt needed addressing. And of course, a lot of the work I do myself is looking at the urban forest, and of course, around 70% of that urban forest is in private ownership, with a lot of those trees in private gardens. And a manual for people who are looking after those trees is important, because their trees are important. They're part of that greater whole. So yeah, so that's where the idea came from.
And how did you plan the different sections together? Take us through the book. What can people find inside?
So the book goes from essentially why we wrote the book, and an introduction, and then what is a tree, and then other sections on. So I've got a copy of the book here. So yeah, what is a tree? The parts of a tree. Then why trees? So the benefits of trees. Why would you want to plant them? And also the disbenefits of trees as well, because if you plant a tree, it might be around for 200-300 years, and might bring you a lot of pleasure, but it could also bring other people a lot of pain as well. So the next chapter deals with site selection and planting a tree. And these are the sections Tony wrote, of course, with his great experience from being at Kew and working in the botanical gardens. So the site selection and planting of trees. And then we go on to pruning trees, aspects of health and safety, troubleshooting, pests and diseases. And then finally, there a section on sort of species of trees and species selection as well.
Fantastic.
And I think, adding to that, Sharon, it's about, as Kenton said, bringing arboriculture into the general public's domain, not being too technical, but taking it a little bit further than, say, one of the Hessian garden guides, giving people a bit more information, and I hope a bit more confidence in selecting and planting a tree in a garden, and being able to go to a nursery or a garden centre and asking for a tree, and knowing what you're asking for, and knowing what you're going to get, how to look after it, and as Kenton said, then planting it and then managing it right through to removal and a troubleshooting guide. And we felt that was lacking in that market. But actually, the book turned out, I think, far beyond what Kenton and I expected, and it's been adopted by the professional arboricultural world now. And I think a lot of colleges use it as an arboricultural textbook for certainly, starting off at level 1 and 2 in arboriculture. And I'm not saying it. I'm not saying it because we wrote it, but it is a really good starter manual for anyone thinking of going into arboriculture.
Yeah, it is. It's really well illustrated and sort of broken down into handy sections. But I wondered, did you write it all on your own, or did you have some help from other organisations and people, Kenton?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. So, I started out my career in arboriculture climbing trees. And so a lot of the practical stuff to begin with, I learned from my old boss, Bill, a private tree care company in Exeter, green trees. And then throughout the book, really, it's such a wide subject area, trees, that it's important to engage with other specialists. So the Arboricultural Association actually helped us a lot with the trees and the law section. And Keith at Bartram Trees helped with some of the plant stuff on the tree species selection. A lot of the photographs actually from that. Yeah. That's
great. Well, we've got our first question in from Caroline Moyer. Caroline, are you there, please? Here we go. I'm sure Caroline, if you are there, could you kindly turn on your microphone and your camera if you're comfortable to do so?
I'm muted. I'm really sorry.
That's okay.
I'm just unmuted.
Thank you. We can hear you now. Welcome. So what's your question, please, Caroline?
I've got a lemon tree on my 4th floor balcony. It's quite windy up there, but it gets really sunny. And I was shielding, and so this lovely tree just kept me sane. It was just flowering, fruiting. It was just amazing. All the way from March to November, it was flowering, and it kind of overdid it on the fruits, to be honest. And but it was stuffed in a, I don't mean stuffed, but it felt like it was a bit stuffed in a bit more of a shady corner. So my mum just visited. I'm visually impaired, so I can't see to prune it, and she just had a little go at, I wanted it espaliered onto the warm wall, and so she's tried to do that. But I'd like some advice, please, because am I allowed to ask for my advice? Do you want to know?
Yes,
more?
no, that's what we'd love you to do.
Fine.
That,
Thank
please, Caroline.
So,
that's what they're here for.
Thank you. And I'm so excited, and I love my tree so much. And I've got 2 more trees. The Camden Forest Project just gave me a baby rowan and a dog rose, but these are small ones. And my lemon tree is my pride and joy. And so my lemon tree is, because it's now espaliered, half espaliered onto a wall. Then and that wall is in a bit of, that's something, it doesn't rain onto that bit there. So I want to ask about watering it. It gets really wet especially in that water that we just had on the outside bit, but I'm thinking the inside bit, it doesn't get what, and I stuck my finger down into the earth, if you see what I mean, on the method of seeing is it wet, and it wasn't even wet after the massive thing. So I'm thinking, should I specifically water the bit on the wall? And I've got other questions about thinning, because I kind of overdid it, because I just went, oh, it's gorgeous, it's gorgeous, it's gorgeous. But I think I should have thinned out the fruit a bit. Am I going to get my fruit to go lemon coloured, if you see what I mean? I mean, I can show you a picture of it if you want. It's about, it's nearly, I'm about 5'11", it's about my height, but that's kind of like, because it's a bit too thin, and we kind of went to put it up against the wall. When should I prune it more ostentatiously, and when should I consider repotting it? And just now, I just got some citrus fruit food, or whatever you call it, through the post. So I'm hopefully, but give me advice about how to look after my lemon tree, please. And I will do what you say, because I love it.
Kenton, do you want me to go?
Yeah, you go on this one. Yeah. I've had no success with my lemon tree at all. It got covered in aphids and died.
Well, I'll tell you what, Caroline, if your lemon tree's in good health and it's happy, and that's always a good sign. And like Kenton said, some people can grow them, some can't. So if you're getting fruit, if it's flowering and you're getting fruit and it's looking healthy, then you're doing something right. They will tolerate drought because they're citrus, and they come from hot climates. So they do not like being in shade, full stop. So they will need some sun, to ripen the branches that will get them through the winter, so they won't get caught by frost or anything, but also to get those flowers going for producing fruit. So they will need full sun. If part of the pot isn't getting moisture, then you will need to water that side as well, because the roots on that side will die off. And then the branches on that side, especially if you're espaliering it, will also die off. So you need to get that water on both sides, if it means that you need to manually water that side occasionally. And also they will tolerate poor soil, but they don't, and they will become pot bound. And at some stage, and usually they'll go chlorotic and tell you that they need potting up. Yeah. And you'll need to repot it. And if you want to keep it in the same size pot, then you'll have to start bonsaiing it by pruning some of the roots off to get more compost in there. But you need a free draining compost. And you said that you got some feed, so that's really good, because there is special citrus feed that you'll need to give it. And if you're getting it's a lemon, is it, or an orange?
It's a lemon. It's not lemon. Last year it was just like covered in lemons, and I actually had to tie it up because it was so many lemons on it. It was just.
You got the gin. You got the gin and tonic ready as well.
None of them have gone lemon yet, but that's why I've just spalliated it to take it to a warmer wall, so that then they will actually, because you could, I reckon on this very hot wall, they will actually go yellow in 1 year.
Well, they will ripen, and you're right. You may need to thin them if there's too many. So, decide how many you're happy with, and then thin down to that, and you should be.
When
okay.
did you thin them? Because they're so fragrant and they're so beautiful when they're flowering, and when they've got the babies, they're so cute. All my friends are like, "Where's the?" And there's hundreds of them on here.
Wait for them to start turning into fruits before you thin them, because some of them may abort and not turn into fruits. So you're better off waiting for them to produce fruits and then thin them, so you're thinning the fruits. Okay, and it will get mealybug and aphids and scale. They are very, very susceptible to that, so you need to look at managing that. Spray down every now and again.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the watering stuff, especially because my mum said, no, you don't need to do that. And I thought, oh, I bet you do.
No, you do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. That's a great question and really makes me want to have a gin and tonic now. So our next question is from David Hackett. David, are you there, please? And could you turn on your mic and your camera, please? Thank you.
Afternoon. I'm just looking for some advice on anthracnose of plane. I noticed some on the street tree, and it looks like it's the London plane, about 120 years of age, within 2 meters of my front garden of a terrace house in Dublin City.
Okay, and what do you want to know? What anthracnose of plane is, David?
No, looking at what I can do, because the only source, and the neighbours can do, because the only source of groundwater for it with the road and the path is our front gardens and things. Age, and given it was planted at the same time as the houses were built. Yeah,
and am I right? Did I hear you say anthracnose of plane? Yeah.
Yes, anthracnose in.
Well, there's not a lot you can. There's not a lot you can do actually. And anthracnose of plane is a blight. It can be a bud blight, a leaf blight, or a twig blight, and it can vary from year to year on how the tree's affected. But it causes premature leaf fall, and that's the main problem. That they can drop the leaves, and it will vary from year to year. The amount of leaf, the sort of how bad the disease affects the tree, but then they'll reflush and regrow. And I've not seen a tree actually killed by anthracnose of plane. It just becomes a bit of a nuisance that you get this early autumn. But in terms of stopping it, there's not a lot you can do, and you just have to run with nature. Kenton, what you?
Yeah, I'd concur with you on that. I would add, you can, because doesn't the fungus if you take the leaf litter away, but obviously that might not be that practical with a large plane tree. Taking that leaf litter away every year, and it's just more, it's unsightly, isn't it? But that can further stress the tree, and it could then be more susceptible to something else a bit more serious. And I guess it might be stressed because of another reason as well. But
the problem as well with plane leaves is that they don't make good compost, or they take a lot. You've got to shred them, really chew them up to make good compost. So if you put them on your compost heap, you'll have fossilized plane leaves the following year, because they just don't break down. But Kenton's right, you can destroy the spores by burning the leaves and getting rid of them. But if it's anything like round where I live, there are a lot of plane leaves, a lot of plane trees, and you're not going to be going around the street bringing them all in. So I think you've got to live with it and hope that it's not a bad year for leaf fall. And I suppose the drier it is, the more severe the infection will be.
Great, thank you. Does that answer your question, David?
It does and it doesn't. But I was just more wondering, was there any of the foliar sprays or whatever? Because yes, I sort of was suspecting it was blight.
Yeah.
And you know, we are in an area where our local authority does not have a tree officer at present.
Yeah. I don't know.
We can't go to them for.
Yeah. I don't know of
association
anyone.
are hoping to.
Yeah. I don't know of anyone that uses a fungicide spray to control anthracnose of plane, especially a big mature plane. It's a big tree. There are rigs that will do it, but you know, we're all trying to be more friendly to biodiversity and reduce the amount of pesticides that we use. So we're you know, we let nature take its course. But there will be fungicides that will probably they won't cure it or prevent it. They may help it, but you know, it's a lot of fungicide that you're going to be spraying.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. I've got a question now from Jamie Balfour-Paul. Jamie, are you there, please?
Jamie's just coming back into the meeting room. I think he's got a bit of an iffy internet connection, so he's just coming back in.
Okay, well, I've got another question that we had sent to us prior to this meeting on social media, which was, there are stems and twigs growing down low on the trunk of my garden tree, up below the branches. Should I pull them off? So that was a question from a member of the public who's not able to be here right now, but I think it's an interesting general question. What do you think about that? I think they're talking about what we call epicormic shoots.
Yeah, they could be epicormic shoots or suckers, Sharon. So my first question will be, if it's a garden tree, an ornamental tree, is it grafted? And if it's a grafted tree on a rootstock, then they could be suckers growing from the rootstock. In that case, they would need to be removed. If it's epicormic growth, then it could be, you know, a stressed tree, and an epicormic growth is a sign of a stressed tree. We usually let the tree. We'll try and find a remedy to de-stress the tree, rather than just taking the epicormic off. And then let nature remove the epicormic growth in its own time, because it's producing that epicormic growth for a reason, and it's usually because it can't photosynthesize or draw enough water from the existing leaf stock that it has. So it's supplementary, and it's doing it for a reason. So it's often a symptom of a stressed tree, and we would try and find out what the problem is and cure that before removing the epicormic.
Kenton, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, yeah, it does depend on what type of tree it is. I know some examples, like Tony was saying, they're on cherries, where they're grafted either at ground level or higher up, and they're normally grafted on a wilder sort of variety or rootstock, and they can be much more dominant, and so those buds can come out of the sides, and they will dominate, and so they do need pruning if you want to keep that original shape and the flowering. The other thing is it can occur from mower damage on roots as well. So sometimes they'll sprout from the damage to the buttress roots. So don't mow right up to the base of your trees.
Mm.
No, nor strim. Anybody listening, I'm sure nobody who's attending this will be strimming around the base of their new trees, but it does happen sometimes. So yeah, leave an area for mulching, but you can read about that in the book. But I've got another question now from Ina about her foxglove tree. That's a really beautiful tree. Ina, are you there, please?
I am. Hi, how are you?
Thank you.
So like David, I too am in Dublin, and I planted a Polonia tomentosa probably about 10, maybe 12 years ago. And I'll be honest, I'm not actually mad about its flower. I planted it for its foliage, and my intention was to pollard it every year or every couple of years. I did it in maybe 2 years into having planted it, but I haven't done so since. My fear now is that it's so tall. It's probably maybe, it could be somewhere like 14, 15 feet, whatever that is in metric. And yeah, I'm just kind of, I think, well, will I just bite the bullet and cut its head off and take a chance? Or I'd like to hear what Tony and Kenton have to say. And then I can blame somebody else if it doesn't leaf up. I'll be over to Kew to get back to you.
Well, actually, it's one of my favourite trees.
Okay.
And if you look at the picture behind me, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, in the frame, yeah.
There's a painting by a Japanese artist of Paulownia. So it is a great tree. And do you know what? It's music to my ears to hear that you planted it as a foliage plant, because many people don't realise how good it is in a herbaceous border for its big leaves. What sort of diameter is the trunk at the base?
Oh gosh, I nearly, can I run out and go and check and come back into it?
Is it less than 10 centimetres?
It's probably not, not.
Yeah. And has it made quite a gangly specimen as a tree?
It's actually beautiful, and it's in a raised bed. So
gosh,
I think initially it probably stretched a little bit for light. Yeah. But it's lovely broad, lovely canopy and everything. I kind of feel, and of course, it's just brilliant it's the only tree I have in the back garden. Yeah. And it's full of blackbirds and you know, and the like. So
I'm going to give you two options.
Okay.
One is to keep it as a tree.
Yeah.
Especially if it's made a nice specimen, because it is, this time of the year, it is a fantastic tree. And it's a showstopper and an eye turner, a head turner of people walking past. But if you didn't want it as a tree, and you wanted to carry on and grow it as a foliage plant, then it will still be small enough to prune. But I would stool it right to the ground.
Okay.
Okay, and by doing that, and if you did it now, and then get plenty of mulch on it, and maybe even some feed, some organic fertilizer, and mulch, and water it, you will get the vigor in that stem will put some big shoots out, and you'll get leaves. Well, I don't have to tell you how big they'll be. I've seen them a metre across, a metre round, and it will be a stunning foliage plant in the garden. You can do it with ailanthus as well. That's another one that you can put a tree of heaven in and then floor it, and do it every year, every other year. And so
you're sorry, Tony, for cutting across. So you're talking about coppicing it, basically.
Yeah, coppicing it's better than pollarding it.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Thank you. That's brilliant.
You're welcome. Good luck.
Okay. Wonderful. We've got Jamie back now. So Jamie, are you there, please?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry, my connection's not great.
Well, tell us about your questions for the panel.
Oh, well, I had a quick one about the discussion about native versus non-native trees, and whether the panel thinks non-native is okay. I know we're talking arboretums, but I guess I'm talking about woodlands, because many people say it's a good thing. But my main question was, I have an Acer palmatum, a sort of standard Acer tree in a pot, and it's been in for 2 years, but never very healthy, and it's finally wilted and looks like it's about to die. And the stem is very discolored. It's sort of green at the bottom, and green, and then it goes sort of dark brown at the base. And it doesn't look like frost damage because there's no burning of the leaves. So I wondered if the panel knows what might be wrong with this maple tree, because it looks like a sort of wilt or fungus, but I have no idea. Thank you.
So I take Kenton, I'm going to let you do the native versus non-native, because I'm known as the native Taliban. But I might come back to that as well and add my bit. But Jamie, it sounds like your Japanese maple's got verticillium wilt. I mean, you said straight away it looks like a wilt. They are very susceptible to verticillium wilt or phytophthora, and that's what I would say it is. And some of the maples are more susceptible to it. I don't know if it's a particular cultivar. It will be grafted probably if it's a cultivated form. And they do suffer from and verticillium wilt's often caused by sunburn and cold, or overwatering, waterlogged, and then once they get it, then they go into what we call a mortality spiral, especially in a container, and then they do not want to come back. And so that's what I would suggest you've got there, Jamie, with your Japanese maple.
Sorry, if it is a wilt, is there anything I can do about it? I shouldn't plant another one.
I think it will just start to die back now and then turn its toes up, and that'll be the end. Yeah.
And I couldn't replace it with another one in the same pot because it's a new pot.
Well, if in the same pot or raised bed, but I would take I'd get rid of some of the soil and compost and re-soil. And then you need a really good, vigorous plant from a reputable nursery, and get it off to a good start so it grows away from it. And if it's any consolation, I have this week I looked at a collection of Japanese maples in an area in Kew this week, and about 3 of them have verticillium wilt, and probably caused by the frost. So it's frost damage that's induced the wilt.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Kenton, over to native versus non-native. I'm assuming Kenton's a native lover, but you know.
Well, yes and no. I mean, yeah, I guess thinking about urban areas, they're a designed, manufactured landscape anyway. And I think there's nothing wrong with planting non-natives in the urban landscape, provided all the biosecurity measures are met and, on where you source those trees from. And thinking about climate change, I mean, we've only got, I think it's 32 native species. And, it's a blip in evolutionary terms, but we've lost the elms, we're losing ash. There's other new diseases on the horizon coming over here. And in places like Sweden, they've only got 9 native species. And so really, if we want to build resilient landscapes that are future-proofed, we're going to have to start thinking about non-natives, or even planting native species, but from seed sources that are from somewhere else, because the rate of climate change is quicker than that which trees can migrate and escape that changing climate. And I know there's arguments for and against, and actually there's a great book I've just read by Zach St. George, which is all about this, The Journeys of Trees, it's called. And it's, thinking about Torbay, which is sort of in my neck of the woods, they're looking at, they should be looking at trees that are probably from the Loire area of France. What grows well there will probably grow well in Torbay. And it's a project called Climate Matching that's been done by Forest Research. And equally, Glasgow should be looking at what grows well in Torbay as to what to plant for the 2080 climate scenarios. Now, that given that there's also an argument to protect the genetic diversity of native trees as well, where possible. So it's a fine balance, I think. And yeah, but in our urban areas, we are going to have to think about broadening the palette, definitely. And the great thing is there's a really good connection there with the botanical gardens, because we know what is growing well in our country, because they've been in our botanical gardens for a couple of 100 years now. The first London plane was planted in 1647. Well, the oldest one we know of up in Ely. that is still growing strong and has got really good extension growth on it. In Torbay, sycamore, much maligned, but that's growing really well.
Love it.
Yeah. And I know, I could carry on, but I'll let Tony talk a little bit as well, because I know.
Well, I totally agree with you, Kenton. And for me, it's right tree in the right place. As Kenton said, there are many pests and diseases that are affecting our native trees at present. Acute oak decline, sudden oak death, and then pests as well, oak processionary moth, just on oak. And then there's potentially, well, I know sweet chestnut's not a native species, but it's naturalized and a really good tree. But there's the oriental gall, there's chestnut blight, and there's a whole range of P&D that are affecting our native trees. A lot of what I call big trees, or the shade trees that we're going to need, are under threat. And if we're going to have a good canopy cover in this country in 25, 50 years, and we've got to integrate more exotic trees, introduce trees into our landscape. So and even in a woodland, Jamie, I'm doing some woodland designs at present, and I'm using British natives. I'm parachuting exotic species in as well amongst them for my big tree that are going to make the big tree canopy in 50 years' time.
I think that's a really good point. And we've seen with climate change that there is also an increase in pests and diseases. And we had a question in from somebody who is interested in why is there an increase in pests and diseases? So would either of you like to talk about that? And before you do, could I kindly request that everybody turns their microphone off who's not actually speaking, if they may? Thank you. So pests and diseases on the rise in the last 100 years. It seems to be escalating, and why?
Kenton, do you want to start?
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, there's globalization. There's much more traffic and movement of not just trees, but it's mainly pallets and things which carry. It's how they reckon emerald ash borer got across to the States, and it's currently on the way from Moscow, moving west. I think it's in Poland at the moment, and that's moving along, and it follows transport corridors. So that it's a big issue because it's difficult to pick up. Eventually, it's not a question of if, it's going to be a question of when, really. And that's why I think it goes back to this point of having a diverse treescape that can take the knocks, because it's not just what you do, it's the way that you do it. And we do have a lot of population bubbles with our trees. So the Victorians and Edwardians planted a whole load of plane. I've seen a lot of projects where, Pyrus Chanticleer as an example, that they're planted a lot in some of these swanky developments, and they're a lovely looking tree, but they're all from one individual clone. And that means they're going to be susceptible to new pests and diseases that come across. I did ask the question at a seminar a couple of years ago on pests and diseases, and I wondered if, because there's a graph showing the pests that have come into this country, Dutch elm disease, and then it just rockets from exponential curve. And I asked, have we reached peak pest yet, and will it tail off? And the answer was probably not, which was a bit worrying.
And I suppose it's a freer movement of nursery stock. So we're part of Europe, and a lot of nursery stock comes in from the continent, from Germany, Holland, Italy, etc. And a lot of pests have been introduced on the movement and transplanting of trees from the continent. And what we need to do, we've got to tighten up on biosecurity, and now is probably a really good time to start looking at by UK grown and sourced stock. And I hope that the tree growing industry in this country will take off in the next few years, and that will be, you know, one way that we can reduce the potential threat from pests and diseases. You know, one disease that we haven't mentioned yet is a disease called Xylella, which has killed all the olives in southern Italy. But that disease isn't fussy; it doesn't stick with olives, and it affects a huge range of woody plants. And it's not over here yet. And I say yet because everybody says, you know, it will come. And we really don't want that, because it's a very, very difficult disease to diagnose and a very difficult disease to control. If there isn't a control, it's fell and burn. And we really don't want that. So we've got to be stricter on biosecurity when we're sourcing material now, and as Kenton says, you know, diversity in our landscape to build a more resilient landscape to these pests and diseases that are out there.
Well, thank you for that. And one of the other questions we had in earlier is what's the single most thing that somebody can do to make sure their newly planted tree is healthy and thrives?
Cool. Well, first of all, and I'm tree planting is one of my favourite subjects, as you know, Sharon. Plant it at the right depth. So plant your tree properly, plant good nursery stock. Don't be tempted to put loads of fertiliser and compost in the planting pit when you plant it. Dig a shallow pit, square, spit deep or as deep as the root. So don't over dig a planting pit, and go wide rather than deep. Mulch it, but keep the mulch away from the trunk, and water. Trees, newly planted trees, need watering. And even with all the rain that we've had this week, it won't be enough for newly planted trees, because most of that will not have penetrated down into the root zone. So, you know, watering is critical. If you stake it properly, use the right stake, and you can find out all this information in a step-by-step guide in the Haynes Manual. But use proper materials, proper tree stake, tree tie, and once you've staked it, if the stake's on for any length of time, check the tie that it's not biting in, and be looking at removing that stake after a year. So those are just a few steps and plant the right tree in the right place. But get the manual and read the manual.
Yep, there's a good section in there. And we've had somebody in a chat, David Aspinall, has been putting some really interesting things in a chat about ash dieback. Sadly, David, I don't believe you've got a microphone or a camera, but he's saying that he's found a method for sort of helping limit ash dieback disease. And I wondered what both of your thoughts are. First of all, perhaps just to explain to everybody briefly what ash dieback disease is, how it's spreading, and are there any treatments or solutions available? So shall I start with Kenton on that one, about what ash dieback disease is?
Yeah, so I mean, it's quite a serious issue, the ash dieback, and it was picked up, I think it was in Denmark first, and it's affected over 90% of the trees there, and it's now here and it's spreading. But like I said earlier about evolutionary blips, I think much longer term, because it doesn't always kill the ash, it knocks them down in successive years, the dieback, and it's a very small fungal fruiting body. It's very difficult to spot. And one of the signs is like a diamond-shaped area of necrotic bark. Is it, Tony?
Underneath like a lesion.
Yeah, underneath some of the smaller branches. And I mean, they're reporting over the 90% losses of ash trees in Denmark, and they're saying that, you know, it's going to wipe out a large proportion of ours as well. And if we look back to the elm trees, you know, we've kind of lost those in the landscape. Ash will probably be next, but this is in human. You know, we look at human timeframes give it a couple of thousand years, and the ash might come back.
Okay.
I've yet to. I mean, I've not heard of a cure for ash, or even a control for ash dieback. Again, it's sort of the spores overwinter on leaves, dead leaves, so removal of leaves may help. And I've heard of treating trees with biochar and things like that. But I think the interesting thing will be, I think the answer is we don't know how it will affect the ash population overall. And the temptation is to remove trees, you know, that potentially have it and are dying back. But some of the old trees may have some resistance. And the interesting thing about ash compared to Dutch elm disease is that all the elms are vegetatively propagated, so they're all cloned. You know, they're all produced from suckers down hedgerows, so they're all like genetically identical. So if one gets the disease, they all get it, and if one dies, they all die. The thing with ash is that they're all sexually propagated, so they're all grown from seed, and they're all different genotypes. And just like we as the human race are all sexually propagated, some of us are resistant to COVID, some of us aren't. Some of us get COVID but get better, some of us don't, some of us die. And I think the same will be for ash dieback. And I think we've got a few years to see how ash dieback actually fares in the end. But a lot of people are felling ash now, particularly if they're by roadsides or near footpaths, etc. If there's any element of danger, and they're in a health and safety situation, then they're removing them. So lots of ash will be removed regardless of ash dieback, which is a shame really, but to be expected.
Well, what David Aspinall is saying, that I read this out, he's found that by spreading hydrated lime from a builder's merchant under the ash canopy at 4 tons per hectare, it gives the tree a sufficient boost to throw off the infection. It's usually the older trees that are affected. The talk of 95% loss is simply defeatist. So there's a point of view. I know there is a lot of research taking place with various methods. You talked about biochar as well, and various successful methods and some not so successful, but I'm merely relaying what David has to say. And David, if there's anything else you'd like me to add, please put that in the chat.
Yeah, what we have found, Sharon, is that the young ash are going quicker. They go first. So newly planted ash and ash up to 20, 25 years old are the ones that go first before the mature trees. You know, as professionals as well, we have to be careful because a lot of things we can't do because it's what we call off-label use. So we can only do things that we're allowed to do in a professional situation, particularly with pesticides or things like lime, etc. So, but you know, and we should try anything. I agree. We shouldn't be defeatist. And we should always be doing our best for trees.
Thank you. Well, we had another question in before this session about tree pruning. And somebody's asking, do I have to prune my tree to keep it healthy? And also, where's the best place to prune a branch from? Is it close to the trunk or do you leave a stub? And what about paints?
Wow. Well, there's a really good chapter in the Haynes Manual on tree pruning, and it runs through it in good detail. And no, you don't need to prune a tree to keep it healthy, and often less is best. And what can I say? Fruit trees we need to prune to maintain flower, bud and encourage fruit. But most ornamental trees, if we plant the right tree in the right place, shouldn't require pruning, apart from maybe the crown lifting, getting some more light into the garden, or removing dead wood, etc. With regards pruning, the best place to prune a branch to, the best place to prune a branch back to is the parent branch. So if a branch grows from a branch, then prune that branch back to the branch. If a branch grows from the trunk, then the best place is to prune that branch back to the trunk. and we do something called target pruning. And every woody plant produces a branch bark ridge and a branch collar, and creates a target for us to prune back to. So we used to do something called flush cutting, which was cutting as close back to the parent branch or as close back to the trunk as possible. We don't do that now because we produce elongated or egg-shaped cuts that don't callus properly, and we break into the tree's defensive barrier system that is like a mechanism to compartmentalize decay, etc. So there is the perfect place to prune a branch back to. That's by not breaking into the branch bark ridge and pruning down to the branch collar. So all pruning cuts, where possible, should be a circle and or like donut shaped, so they callus over evenly. And as I say, we don't break into the tree's defense mechanism. But in the Haynes Manual, there's a good step-by-step guide that shows that. And if we do that, then we don't need to use tree paints. So we don't use tree paints today, and often they're hindered callus and repairing. Sharon, you're demonstrating the step-by-step guide. Great. Yeah.
It's all there, folks. Kenton, do you have anything to add on tree pruning?
Only it's best to prune little and often. And if you do the formative pruning whilst the tree is small, you can avoid the need to prune larger branches later. Because if you're pruning larger branches back to the trunk on more mature trees, then the risk of a fungal infection getting in is greater, because it's just going to take longer for that wound to heal.
Yeah, and you know, we always say it's best to prune with secateurs, but you know, so start young, as Kenton says. And that's better than having to go back maybe 5 or 10 years later and think, God, I wish I'd removed that branch. But then removing it with a nice sharp modern saw is better than going back 50 years later and having to take it off with a chainsaw. So, you know, start with the secateurs and do it as early as possible, formative pruning.
And talking about pruning, another thing that's a really popular question is, do I need permission to prune my tree? Tell us about the bits of law that apply.
Kenton, you're a good lawyer.
So, yeah, generally speaking, you do have a right to prune branches over your property if they extend over your property, but only up to the boundary of your property. So if the branch extends further back, you can't cut the branch at the further towards the stem of the tree necessarily. It has to be on a line extending up your boundary. And that's all theoretically well and good, but it's probably not very good manners, and you're likely to upset your neighbour if you do that. So that's the common law. You can cut branches that grow over, and actually I think you can sever roots as well that grow under. However, if that causes more damage to the tree and renders it a higher risk, then you could get into trouble there with the roots.
That's right. And some trees are protected, aren't they, in law?
Yeah, I was going to mention tree preservation orders. So before you work on any tree, even if it's in your own garden, it's best practice to ring the planning department of your local authority and check that there's not a tree preservation order on it, or that you live in a conservation area. And if you do, then you'll need to get permission from the local authority.
And we've got a comment here, which you're all dying to know. I'm speaking on behalf of the audience here, but particularly from Lale. Kenton, what does the rest of your T-shirt say? Why do we need to keep calm?
So it's keep calm and value trees. There you go.
Brilliant.
Because
Those people who don't know, what do we mean by value trees rather than just love them? Tell us a little bit about what you mean by valuing trees.
Well, trees provide a lot of benefits to people living in towns and cities. And we all know trees look nice, but also they do a lot of other things as well. They provide us with a lot of benefits. They filter the air pollution from the air, so that, you know, the trees across London filter 14% of the air pollution produced by transport, which is, you know, not an insignificant sum. There's an often quoted study by a chap called Ulrich that was done in 1984 that showed that people with views of greenery outside of their hospital beds had quicker recovery times. And so that's what we mean when we're talking about, keep calm and value trees.
Kenton, in the Haynes Manual, which is what we're talking about today, you did a fantastic double-page spread of an urban situation with all the values of trees, which was I thought was really neat. Really.
I'll just try and find that now, actually. So tree benefits, the scientific term is ecosystem services. And currently there's a term going around.
Sharon's beat you to it.
Public good. Yeah, thanks, Sharon. They're proving men are no good at multitasking. So there's over 20 different benefits that trees can provide in urban areas. There's 100 benefits that we get from our natural areas and ecosystems, and they're all listed in the common international classification of ecosystem services. And so that image you just held up, Sharon, shows the ones that relate to trees and us.
Brilliant. Well, thank you both so much. And thank you for taking part. We couldn't do it without you. Some great questions. I never knew that lemon trees were so easy to grow and needed such care. So I've learned a lot. You've been a brilliant audience and wonderful panel. So thanks again. And don't forget to donate. The Urban Tree Festival is a really great organisation. Check out their website. A really great variety of different events as well. So if you can donate, we'd be really grateful. So we have a couple of minutes left. So I'm going to end by asking you both, what's your favourite garden tree? Kenton.
My favourite garden tree is the silver birch. And that's because it grows relatively quickly and it casts sort of a dappled shade, doesn't crowd everything out.
Excellent. And Tony?
Gosh, well, mine's an exotic. So mine's got to be the Chinese tulip tree, Liriodendron chinense. It's a very well-behaved tree, makes a lovely medium-sized to large tree, great leaf shape, great leaf colour, lovely flower, quite rare in the wild, and just a really nice tree.
Wonderful. So I'll say goodbye, but before I do, this is the book. It's all here, folks. Everything you wanted to know, and it's available from all good bookshops and online. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
Bye.
Thank you, Kenton. Good to see you all.
Thank you.